Hello. I think we should get started with this session. Let me know in the chat if the sound is good for you, if you can hear me well enough, or if the music is too hard, too loud. So I had this idea to just start doing some live coding sessions, some streaming of how I write code, and why not at the same time do it in such a way that we can show how to write code for Rhino plugins, and in the future we can branch out to other parts of Rhino and Grasshopper code. So thanks chat for letting me know that the sound is good. I guess I'll just get started then. So my Visual Studio Code here in the middle is completely empty at the moment, so nothing in my folder. And before I start going through the code, I'll just quickly show what plugins I mainly rely on while typing code. And for me, one of the most important plugins is the Vim emulation. Oh wait, my hands are a bit in the way, so let me change that for a moment a bit. So let me move this a bit out. Oh, not that one. Let me move. Wait, how do I do that? Let's see. Let's take the one without the head and then turn off the hands for a moment. So I'm using Vim a lot, or Vim bindings in this case. I've just learned to use this long ago, and I guess it stuck a lot. This I use a lot for navigating in the code. Another plugin I use quite a bit is rewrap, and that's word wrapping, and you'll see soon enough why I use this. And then a plugin that I've started creating myself is literate programming, and I'll be at least trying to use that also in my streaming sessions. If you wonder what literate programming is, don't worry, we'll get, or you'll see it soon enough. Other than that, there's actually not much to it, I guess. C# I have now enabled, at least for this workspace. Mainly because I'm going to write a C# plugin for Rhino. And this is going to be super simple plugin setup. And I'm going to do it exactly in just Visual Studio Code and using .NET tools. Thank you, Yusuf. Yeah, I like my keyboard as well. Let me turn it back on. So this is a split keyboard, and on your screen it now shows with the top rows up, but actually I am now pointing down, so the floor is where I'm now pointing with my fingers, and this top row is where I'm at with my hand. So I am standing here, I stand while working, I have my keyboard essentially next to me, my left side and my right side. Anyway, the keyboard is not the most important part, so let's get started with some code. Actually, the first thing that I want to do is figure out a good name for my plugin for the live coding sessions. And I'm not going to put it in this main directory I have here. Actually, I'm going to create a separate or a subfolder. So let's do that first. I think Yester Live Code sounds like a good name. Yoon asks if I am using usual Visual Studio Code over Visual Studio, and it kind of depends. I try to move more to using Visual Studio Code for the editing part. Debugging, Visual Studio is still hands down the best debugger available that I know of, at least what I have used. No doubt there are even better tools out there, but Visual Studio Code does not have really good debugging utilities as Visual Studio has. Visual Studio has just really well integrated tools in that sense. It is possible to do debugging with Visual Studio Code, but especially when you're working with both managed and unmanaged code, it's just better to use Visual Studio. But for a plugin like this, just only C# code, .NET managed code, it should be fine to just do Visual Studio Code. And actually for this stream at least, I won't be doing any debugging. It's all so simple code. There is no need for that. So Yester Live Code, that's where I'm going to put my my code in. So let's go into there. And .NET New is essentially what I'm going to use. Just quickly showing what are the possible common templates. It's a Razor web app, console, WinForms, WPF console. And what we are going to do is essentially a class library, a common library. So what we are going to do is just .NET new class like so. And for a regular .NET project, it's just .NET project is just fine. And we have here the project file. We also get already a C# file. We are not going to use that one. So actually, let's see. I think it's best if I start by creating in this folder my Yester Live Code code file. So at the moment I'm not going to worry yet about the C# project file or anything like that. I'm just going to get started with the basics. And I'm going to call this .literate. And as I mentioned, this is part of a coding approach that I try to use more and more in my work. Daily work is essentially writing prose with the code interspersed with it, and then the tool, my literate programming tool, kind of takes all the code out of code snippets out of that and creates the actual code files for me. The benefit of this way of writing code, I find, is that I have to actually think in human language terms of what I am going to do and explain it in such a way that another reader who is perhaps not so knowledgeable about the things I'm doing can understand what I'm doing. There's a question in a chat about using F# for Rhino and Grasshopper plugins. I actually like doing that a lot, but for work I mostly use C#, mainly because there are co-workers who need to understand the code as well, and I don't think F# necessarily is hard to understand, but it can be an obstacle for other coders as well. So it's best to go with the language that's known to most of the co-workers. So my literate file is essentially just a glorified markup document, of markdown document, I should say. So when I start writing, let's say we are going to do creating a Rhino plugin, and you can just see here in the outline for this file, since it's just a markdown file, you will get a nice outline that's provided by a Visual Studio Code. Introduction. So all this code that I'm going to write during these sessions will go into GitHub, and I'll publish this, so you should be able to also follow or read the code afterwards. So we are going to go over setting up the project and adding a command. Let's see how far we get with the initial part. And as said, I try to force myself to write as many things down as I think is necessary, especially because after a few weeks, maybe even after a few days, it may be that I don't recall anymore for 100% why I made certain choices, and writing things down right away is just good practice, so that you have a record of what you decided what to do at that point in time. So for this plugin, we are going to use Visual Studio Code and .NET tools, and that also means that we're not relying on Visual Studio nice IDE integration things that where it's quite easy to add new files and classes and things like that. But I'm pressing Alt Q at the moment here, and this is why I use rewrap, so I can just type long lines, and at regular intervals I just try to remember to press Alt Q, then my text gets properly wrapped in column. I believe I have it at 80 columns at the line width. So let's first record that we are creating the project. So we used PowerShell. So what I have here is the shell in here is PowerShell, so I'm just going to use that as a language as well. And that was .NET new class. Since the plugin is essentially a DLL with the extension renamed to RHP, we create the class lib template project, or maybe not the, but a. Like so. Next we have to actually make sure that we can compile this as a Rhino plugin, and there are a few steps, especially now that we have a .NET 6 project here. So if you look at the project file, it says target framework .NET 6.0, and there are some C#10 things enabled. We need to handle that, and I actually could do this project file also in a literate way, but I think for now I'm just going to record the changes that I am going to make. So to have the created project, the generated project, compile as a Rhino plugin, we need to make some changes to the project file. Rhino 7 targets itself the dotnet 4.8 framework. So we are going to do the same. This also means that we need to disable the C#10 features. So let's now first create the proper target. It would be 4. Maybe having the hands on the right location helps with typing. Wait, what am I doing? 4.8. And we need to remove these two lines. And we also need to tell the project that we want an RHP file, not a DLL. Well, essentially it's still a DLL, but we are going to use the project file to do this automatically for us, the renaming. For this we are going to use the target text tag. So let's add a small snippet of code here, XML. So let's target text RHP, and I type it here in all lowercase. So let's copy that line into this. Right. Let me see. So we have now target framework set and the extension. But we're not done yet. So we also want to control the project management manually. This means we need to disable default items, as well as disable automatic assembly information generation. At least for now I'm going to do this, mainly also because I am not entirely sure how to properly manage setting these automatic assembly informations, especially for the Rhino plugin description attributes that we need to add. So Jon asks if there's a problem with using .NET Framework 4.8. No, there's no problem. It's exactly what we should be targeting. That's also why I changed the target framework for this plugin to .NET 4.8. For your own plugin, I think you might be able to use newer .NET versions, but I'm not entirely sure whether then Rhino might complain about language features that are not supported by .NET 4.8 framework. So it's currently safest to just stick to the .NET framework 4.8. So this the manual management we can do with the tags or the settings. I will just call them tags, but oh my, what was it called? Default and enable default items. I have to peek a little bit. Yeah, I think it's enable default items. So enable default items. So we actually want to disable that. And generate assembly info. I believe it's called. Generate assembly info. Yeah, I think that's it. We will see soon enough. So it looks like this. No, not target, we used that already. Enable default items. It also helps if you learn to type. Enable default items. One drawback of my plugin at this moment is that it doesn't do any nice auto-completion or anything like that. I need to work on that still. For now it's going to be just fine. Our project won't be any complex, so it hopefully will fit in our mind. So generate assembly info. We also set to false. Generate assembly. So let's copy these two lines, or maybe do that better. So Shift V and yank those two lines and then paste them over here. And let's do maybe not twice. So indentation. Yeah, I think at least we have now the project management part done. There's probably also a good way to do package reference adding manually, but I always mess up the version numbers with that. So I'm going to use the NuGet Package Manager graphical user interface. I guess it's also one of those plugins, but I forgot what plugin it actually is. Let's see, does it show here? Oh, it's probably this one. Let's see, do we have a graphical user interface? No, it's not this one. Oh, it's not. Of course not. It's the second one, the next one. So it's the NuGet Package Manager graphical user interface that I often use to add new package references. So for this plugin, we are going to use the Rhino common NuGet package. We're just going to search for that. I keep forgetting that for some reason hitting enter after writing a search term does not work here. You have to actually click the button. And we are going to go for Rhino 7.12, so the latest release. So let's just install it. We can peek what it looks like again. Okay, so it was this kind of text. To be able to use Rhino common SDK, we need to add the Rhino common package reference from NuGet. The current version we are going to use we are going to use is let me just copy paste it. Control tab is, and then paste it over here. Jason asks if in Rhino 8, when the CPython integration gets published eventually in the final version of Rhino 8, if it will be possible to write plugins with Python. I'm actually not sure if it's going to be fully fledged plugins like that, but we still have time enough to see how far this can be brought. So for now, at least C++, C plugins and .NET plugins is possible. Time will tell if we can do plugins directly with Python on top of CPython integration. Let's wrap that text a bit nicer. Okay, so this is all still very basic. We haven't written any code, and I'm sure that with a good IDE this could be done much faster. But personally, I actually like to understand what's going on with these project files. There's less magic and more knowledge. So let me actually remove this class 1 file, because we're not going to use that at all. What did we write now? So we have now creating a plugin. This first section actually we're going to call creating the project, and now we are going to go to the first actual code part. So creating the plugin class. So with literate programming, with my tool at least, how you do this is by creating fragments, and these fragments, essentially like the pieces we already have seen here, they're pretty similar looking, except that there are going to be fragment names, and in some cases also file names. So the tool knows how to realize the code and where to put it. So a Rhino plugin derives from one of the plugin classes that is provided by the, and let me see if I remember correctly, I think it's plugins namespace. There are several available for import, export, and so on. But in our case, we are going to do just a simple utility plugin. So this is what we call a utility plugin, and it's a plugin that such a plugin derives from Rhino plugins.plugin. I believe it's with a capital I. Let me quickly look up on our documentation. So a good place to look at our Rhino Common API is indeed developer.rhino3d.com /API/Rhino common. I think /HTML is still also necessary. Let's see. Anyway, I'll put a link to this also in the description of the video. So indeed, it's a plugin with a capital P and capital I. So where was my code? Let's see. Let's wrap that nicely. And then, well, let's create the plugin, shall we? So I'll start with a fragment, and this is C# code. So I tell it's the language type C#, that I'm going to put in an option separating with a colon, and in double sharp brackets, or what are they called? The smaller than and larger than signs, double of them actually. Let's call this Yester live code plugin. And since this is going to also be the fragment that tells, or that determines that this is going to go in a file, I do ** equals, and then a second option is going to be Yester live code, and that is going to be, how shall I call it? I'll just Yester live code plugin. I'm going to add the name Yester live code in front of plugin anyway, because otherwise you get plugin deriving from plugin, and I find it a bit confusing. So this is how we start our code, but for now, actually, let me think. I think I'm just going to first bring in a few of the namespaces that I think that we're going to need. Actually, I don't think we need a system. So Rhino, we're going to need, and using Rhino plugins. And let's have a namespace. Oh, maybe actually I give a name as well to the namespace. Namespace, what was this? Yester live code. And then a public class, Yester live code plugin. Oh, that derives from plugin. I now can just write plugin because we already imported the Rhino plugins namespace here. So for now, let's call it like this, and wait. So, and I'm just going to put here a fragment that tells me that here is going to go the class construction, plugin construction. Yester live code. So if I now, well, let's not do it yet, anyway. So I was going to say if I'm not going to run my tool to create the code, and it actually will now fail because this fragment doesn't exist yet. There have been some questions again in the chat. I'll come to those in a moment. I just want to do the plugin construction first. So I'm going to type here that Rhino plugins are going to be initialized by Rhino, and for plugins there should always be only one instance. So a singleton pattern here is going to be needed. And wrap that code again. So now we're going to do the singleton pattern, and that we're going to do in the next code fragment. So C# fragment, and that was going to be yester live code plugin construction. Oh, construction and ending 3 backticks. And there was a question or mention about it will be nice to see where it wraps to within braces and brackets with this plugin, and I'll just type the code on the leftmost side here for each fragment, and this fragment mention here is already indented, and when the codes get realized, the indentation is preserved essentially, so it's all the code's indented as much as the original indentation for that fragment usage. So we are having a public constructor, which is going to be yester live code plugin. I guess I should have used a capital J there, but let's not bother with that kind of petty things, so to say. And I'm going to check if instance, so I will create a property called instance in a moment. If that is null, maybe not like that again. If instance equals null, oh my, null, then instance is going to be this. And again, we are going to assume that Rhino is the one that's going to instantiate our plugin. If someone else is going to instantiate the plugin, I think Rhino is going to get confused. So we just assume this is going to work like this. So public static yester live code plugin instance, and this is just going to be a getter setter with the setter private, because we want only the plugin itself to be able to set this instance. So now if I run my literate process tool, then you see now here I have 2 new files, an HTML file, which is essentially the markdown file rendered as HTML, and our code. So this code does not have many documentation in it, but that's because our actual documentation is entirely in this literate file, and that you actually can already look through in a preview, so just a rendered form of the markdown. So we're almost done with our first version of the plugin. We still need to add the assembly properties. So really this bit of code, so just setting up a plugin with the simplest possible constructor and the instance, that in this way we have a singleton pattern. What was I going to say? So this is all we need to have our plugin essentially. One more part, as I said, the assembly tags or the assembly information. Rhino really needs that. Actually, maybe I could show what it looks like if it's incorrect. So let's for a moment set this to true. And just make sure we have our code. And let's see if I can now build. I'm going to build on the command line actually. .net build. So that just built fine. You can see here it created a .rhp. And while I start Rhino, do I prefer light background or dark background for coding? It actually varies. I used to use for a very long time dark mode, but I suppose with age the light background is starting to appeal more. Both just really white background and really dark background I don't really like much. That's why for at the moment I'm using this yellowish theme. This theme is actually called Groovebox theme, and it's, I think, quite pleasing for the eye. It's not strong white and it's not very dark, so there's not too much contrast. But of course you use whatever you think is best. For the longest time I actually even used pitch black background and a console green text as a high contrast theme for Windows, because it just looked very fun and a bit Matrix style essentially. Right, Rhino has started. I suppose it's now time to drag and drop our project on top of it. So we build our, I think it's over here. Yes. Let's see what happens when we drag on the. So it tells me now it's trying to load now the file, but Rhino's unable to load the plugin because the Rhino version is not specified. And it's actually a little bit misleading, but this essentially means that the assembly information is incorrect. And I had the project now set to automatic assembly info generation. And again, it's possible to set at least much of the assembly information through this automatic generation, because then you would have a set of tags in this project file. But I don't know how well it works with the plugin description attributes that are needed for the plugin, so that Rhino recognizes it. So let's do this back to false. And in our code here, setting up the assembly information. For Rhino to be able to load the plugin properly, there need to be let's word that the correct assembly attributes need to be present, and there's a bunch of them in the namespace rhino.plugins, and it will be the plugin description attribute. But there's also a GUID that we need to set so that we can identify our plugin. Each plugin needs to have their own GUID. So the GUID that I'm going to use for this plugin, do not copy it. You create your own. GUID. So the plugin attribute needs to be set with several different how do you call them, types? Well, let's call them types. At least they need to be available in the plugin, but you don't necessarily have to give valid information. It's entirely up to you. Also, the assembly needs to have a unique. I'm going to say unique GUID, which is a bit of a twice saying the same, because a GUID is supposed to be unique, but you know, when people copy them, then it's no longer unique. So to have a unique GUID, and finally there needs to be file versioning. So let's first wrap that text a bit nicer, like so, and then we are going to create a new file. Oh wait, like so, C#, oh, and then again a new tag name, or fragment name I should say. So yester live code assembly info, and since this is going to be a new file as well, I certainly can turn down the music. Let me know if that's better. So this is going to be another file. So dot asterisk in this case equals always means we are going to create a new fragment, and then the file name. So this will be actually in the folder yester live code, and there will be a new folder properties, and under that the assembly info file. So that will be yester live code properties and assembly info.cs. First we import some, actually I'm going to be a bit lazy here. I prepared the text for these already a bit. So and then I'm going to fill out some strategic parts of them. So oh wait, maybe I need to copy paste it in a different way. Copy and like so. System reflection. I'm not sure if all of these first three are needed, but let's keep them in because they are generally always there when you create a file or a plugin from a template from a wizard. But we do need the Rhino.plugins namespace, and the types of plugin description that we need are the address, country, email, phone, fax, organization, update URL, and website. As you see, I don't have everything filled out. For this project, I probably could add here the address of the Git repository, except that I have currently the Git repository only locally. I will create one on my GitHub account, and a link to that I will also include in the description for this video when the stream is done. And then assembly title, so that is going to be yester live code, plugin showing the ropes of writing code for Rhino. Sounds like a good description to me. And then the GUID. Let's see. Let me take. I'm going to show you how I often create these. So wait just a moment. So what I generally do is just ask the internet for GUID. And look, a random GUID. And just copy paste that. So thank you DuckDuckGo for a random GUID. Like so. Now for us to be able to actually compile this, we still need to add the code here, because I had set the enable default items to false. So I'm going to create a new item group, like so, and a closing one, item group. And then there will be a couple of compile tags in, and those are going to compile include equals, and that will be the path to the two files that now I have created with the code. So that will be a Yester live code plugin. Oh, I forget the closing part. So, and then this will be the properties assembly info. Yeah, the global unique identifier can be cumbersome, especially when we get to manipulating data in Rhino, especially when you add data to objects to the object table and then only maintain the GUID as a means for identifying your data you're working with. Often, in most cases, inside your own plugin, while working on geometry, it's probably best to keep a reference to that geometry instead of the GUID. But we get to that soon enough. So let's see. Can we now build this plugin? Yes, that worked fine. Start Rhino. And drop in our plugin. Oh, Rhino likes to steal focus often. This one. So let's try again. And look, now no error message anymore complaining that the plugin could not be loaded. So let's check with tools, options, and plugins. And plugins that do not ship with Rhino. Let's see if we can find Yester live code. Yes, a plugin showing the ropes of writing code for Rhino. And version 0010. And the data that we put in there at the beginning. So let's see, we have almost done an hour of a live stream. But I think we could start with one really bare bones command that's not going to do anything. And then the next stream we are going to work out that command. So the idea is that for that command, for the next stream, we're going to look at how to set up the command line options and give a shot at doing a display conduit, so that the object we are going to create and control with the properties on the command line, that while the command is running, that we can draw already a preview of this geometry before we accept the results or the preview and kind of bake it into the document. So we can now close Rhino for now. I actually probably should look up how to just set tasks to run them directly from a Visual Studio Code, but I'm a bit of an animal of my own habits, so I just like to click on the Rhino icon on my taskbar. One more file we add. So for the so we have here the assembly information. Let's go to the end of the file and add a new chapter, creating a command. The command in Rhino derives, unsurprisingly, from the Rhino command class. I have to peek a little bit on how it exactly was called. No doubt this could all be done with good IntelliSense, but this works as well as IntelliSense. A Rhino command in Rhino derives from, and that's going to be rhino.commands.command. And there are two mandatory parts for the command, for a command to implement to get a minimal implementation. Let's go with minimal. I'm sure that English speakers know better than me what it's supposed to be. A minimal implementation, so that's going to be let's see. So I'm going to set up the fragments already in such a way that next time we are going to continue with this, we can build out the different fragments. So the nice part of fragments is that I can start a fragment in one place and then on a later state add a bit more code to that one fragment. So how shall I start with this? For this command, we are going to start a fragment with where. So we are going to start a fragment where we are going to collect all the namespace usages. So let's create that one. C#. For now, let's call it just first command usings. And for this one, I'm not going to yet make a file. We do that with the next one. We need at least the Rhino commands namespace, and let's also bring in Rhino, since that is where where Rhino doc lives. So first using Rhino and using Rhino commands. Our command class is going to be called yester live code. Oh, by lack of imagination, it's not going to be yester live code command 1. I'm sure we can rename this later on if we feel like that. Let's also tell that why we call it like this. So right. So now we add our command file sharp. Oh. First command class equals, and then it's going to be come on, yester live code command 1.cs. So we are going to have our first command usings. So this is all the imports we are going to have. And we are going to have a namespace. Oh, a namespace. First type namespace, and that was going to be yester live code. And then we have our public class yester live code command 1, which derives from command. So this is essentially a Rhino commands, rhino.commands.command. And we are going to have overrides. First command overrides, and I think for now that's going to be id. So just the class itself is essentially this. The mandatory overrides for a command class. So let's call this capital C to get a minimal working command class. We need to override what do we need to override? We need to override run command, and I think it's English name. We need to override the method run command as well as the property English name. So first command, oh, I forget something. First command overrides closing text, and then we're going to have a public override string English name, and for that we are going to put in yester live code command 1, and the next, oh actually maybe I do it already here, so let's type it a bit different way. So to get the minimal working command class we need to override the property English name. And this property will essentially be the name of the command as you type it into the Rhino command line. Of course, there's still a possibility of localizing these names, but you can always get to the English name, like the original name, by prepending underbar and then typing the command name. That's the English name. So underbar yesterlife code command 1 would work in any localization of Rhino if there were a localized version of this command name as well. There's not, so we don't have to bother with that. Now we are going to say that, wait, we also need to override the method command, which is going to be the actual meat of the command. Here the driving logic of the command will live. So this is essentially the top level of your command. And now I can add that to my first command overrides y equals and a plus sign. So we do protected override. We use protected because it's decorated like this in the plugin. So we do protected override result run command, and then as parameters this will take a Rhino doc and the run mode. I guess for now we are going to print a simple. We're going to print a simple message, nothing more. And for that we're going to use Rhino app.write write align yester live code command 1 says hello. Come on, Shift A. So let's see if I can generate this code. Did I press correct buttons? It worked well. So we have, oh, see, I am missing still the path. So let's do that. I created in the wrong location. I was forgetting that this needs to be in yester live code folder. So let's do that. And now we have it in the right place. Let's get rid of the old one and still add it to the project file. So this is yester live code command 1. Code has been generated. Let's see if we can compile it. Oh, what did I do? Not all code paths return a value. I forgot to return success. So let's do that. And over here. Return result success. We successfully say hi. there. And let's do a final test. Rhino loading. Right, and then we, oh, I think we don't have to drop the plugin on there because it should be already in here. Let's see, it's in here. Let's load it. Load plugin. It's loaded, yes. And then let's try our command. Yester code live command 1. And we get into our output. Yester live code command 1 says hello. So a small recap of what we did, and it took quite a long time to set up this, mainly because we're going into it in very great detail. So we have our .NET 6 project file. We made sure that it's compatible with what Rhino understands. So Rhino targeting .NET Framework 4.8. So yes, make sure that our extension is going to be automatically named to .rhp. We want to, for now, to control everything ourselves. So we disable enable default items, and we also disable the generation of assembly info. We added a package reference to Rhino Common NuGet package 7.12, and we have references to our code files that we generate in our literate bit. So this is our text, all the explanation we have gone through with all the pieces of code, and all that is now realized as the actual plugin, which is very simple. Just a plugin derived from rhino.plugins.plugin, so a utility plugin, a simple singleton pattern here, assuming that Rhino is the one initializing our plugin. And even if this gets called again, we won't be overwriting the instance with a new instance, so it will always be the very first instance that's going to be used. We have our properties, assembly properties, so plugin description, attributes are needed, so you need to have these at least available in your assembly. You don't have to put in data if you don't want to, but it's probably good practice. I said I'm going to add the update URL here. I'm going to set it to the GitHub repository where I'm going to push this code to. Title for your assembly, that's what the plugin will be called in Rhino. So Yester live code is what you saw in the plugin manager. Some extra information, and then important, a unique GUID, and both of these need to be set to the same version, assembly version and assembly file version. And this is going to be more important for actually for the YAC, if we want to put this on YAC, but we can look into that when we have something useful, something small but useful, and would be useful to have it on YAC, so the Rhino package manager. So I think that's for now going to be all that I'm going to stream. Let's quickly see for some questions. Still, there was some questions that I forgot to look at. So there was what is the way you prefer IL code? to protect from decompiler tools such as Reflector. I generally don't bother with it at all. Sure, it's going to hold back some people, but there will always be people who are just going to crack it no matter what. Personally, I'm not very much into trying to hide as much as I can. I can understand that for some businesses it might be good to protect IP, but in that case I would work in such a way that that the IP is never shared, even with the end user. So maybe something like Rhino compute could be useful. So put your IP essentially on the server and have your plugin communicate with a Rhino compute instance, for instance. That would be one way to ensure your IP or your precious algorithms do not fall into the hands of other people. But if you're going to do just a simple plugin, or just a plugin with all the code in, I think at that point you need to just make the decision that it is always possible for other people to get their hands on your code. And personally, I prefer more sharing than garden walling. I think in general, if we share code, we can all learn better, become better, and improve our code in general. So that's my take on it. And Rhino Common 7.3 I think is the best version to target. Some features from 8 I think are supported also by .NET 4.8. I'm not sure, but 7.3, if you stick to that, you should be fine. The future will show how when we move to .NET 6, it's still unknown. For now, especially Rhino 7, which is now already released, just stick to C# 7 and it should be fine. Rhino 8, currently also still targeting .NET 4.8 framework, so same there, at least on Windows. So I hope you all enjoyed this. I think I'm going to end the stream unless there are still pressing questions. If not, then just put in the questions in the comments to the video on YouTube, and I'll answer them when I see them. And of course, on the Rhino discourse forum, feel free also to start new threads and poke me on there. I prefer public posts so that we all can learn from each other's questions. But other than that, thank you for being with the stream and following the very first stream. I'll let you know when the next stream for continuation is going to come. It will come, but not very soon. Maybe a few days of rest. Have a good weekend all. Bye.